Welcome to this week's edition of the Research Room. My name is Keisha Ann Down and I'm your host today. With me we have Dr. Therese Ferguson Murray. She is from the School of Education and also the Programme Lead from Change from Within. Joining us as well we have Mr. Bromfield, who is an exceptional principal at Excelsior High School. They are with us today talking about the Change from Within programme and focusing on the circle of friends. Thank you so much for being with us today. Very, very excited to hear all about the programme. It would be absolutely brilliant to just give us some information about the Change from Within programme, and I don't know if you'd like to start with that, Dr. Ferguson.
The Change from Within programme actually began in 1992. And it began under the leadership of one of the former vice-chancellors of the University of the West Indies, Sir Philip Sherlock. Now, at that time, Sir Sherlock was concerned about, the increasing rates of violence that he was seeing in society. So he actually convened a committee of social scientists and educators to both try and see what were the causes of what was happening in society and also to see what could be the role of education in addressing these problems. And so what the committee did was they identified 4 schools. These were schools located within inner city communities. And they realized that these 4 schools were actually experiencing transformation in different areas, student attendance, self-esteem among staff and students, parental involvement. And so the committee started to focus on these 4 schools and try to investigate and uncover what is actually taking place, what is accounting for this transformation. And so that is actually where the program had its genesis, within those 4 schools and what Sir Sherlock was trying to find out with respect to violence and indiscipline within society.
And how has the program developed since then?
Since 1992, and based on the findings of that committee, the program has expanded. It's worked in schools within Kingston as well as other parishes within and across the island of Jamaica. It had an approximate 4-year hiatus, and then in 2016 it started back, and we're now working with 11 schools, primary and high schools within, at this moment in time, Kingston. When the program restarted, it did so under an Education for Sustainable Development thrust. And that was basically just putting a name on what already existed, because with its focus on addressing violence, with its focus on values and attitudes, that is basically some of the core components of Education for Sustainable Development. And we've widened that in this new program iteration. So we're looking at violence and indiscipline, values and attitudes, other aspects to do with social issues as well as environmental issues. So it really has that broad umbrella under which it is operating. We have a volunteer team that is working with the program. So it's a 4-member team consisting of myself, one of the founding members of the Change from Within program, a senior accredited coach who assists with the coaching both for students as well as teachers, and it has an Education for Sustainable Development advisor. So those are our 4 members who are working to drive this program.
Okay, brilliant. And what are some of the activities that the program consists of?
Based on the research that had been carried out, that early research, we realized that there were some key components that were common across those initial 4 schools. And so what we have tried to do is to build on those 8 pillars. Those pillars encompass things such as mentorship, for both students, teachers, principals. It encompassed aspects of training and capacity building. It encompassed things like involving parents and children, so all school stakeholders. So building on that, some of the current activities that we've been engaged in, we've undertaken some coaching within the school. So this is coaching driven by our senior accredited coach, and it focuses on students who are deemed at risk in some way. And so she works with these children over a series of sessions. We've also had some training and capacity building workshops, and those workshops have focused on areas such as conflict management, restorative justice, project-based learning, because we want teachers to be involved in new methodologies that can engage students, capture their attention, because if they're involved and engrossed in learning, then they're going to be less likely to engage in those indisciplined behaviors. So the coaching, the training, and capacity building, and then one of the key aspects as well has been our circle of friends. Now that has been a critical component since the beginning of the program. And so that is where we meet on a monthly basis, different individuals, the principals, vice principals, and so forth from the schools that are involved in the program. And we just share. We share best practices, we share challenges, and so forth.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And before we ask you a bit more about the Circle of Friends, if I just come to you, Mr. Bromfield, and if you could tell us about your school's involvement with Change from Within.
Well, I'd put it this way, because I was fortunate enough to be invited to be a part of the Change from Within program in 2016, and we've really benefited in so many ways. I have benefited, and a small number of other staff members, from the interactions in the Circle of Friends, and that has been such a tremendous experience in terms of a small group of colleagues sharing, as Dr. Ferguson mentioned, best practices, sharing problems, sharing solutions, and even solutions that haven't worked, and supporting each other, because that is so very important very often. And then apart from the Circle of Friends, XS has benefited from training of teachers in a wide variety of areas, from the training of middle managers to teachers in terms of project-based learning, in terms of using different kinds of methodologies, to training of administrators and teachers in use of restorative justice. Then we've had our coaching experience where our children have been, some of our at-risk students have been coached, and so we've really benefited. Our training, we've had members of staff participating in training that has been organized by Change from Within, that we leave school to go to training, and then there's been training that has been administered at Excelsior High School, where Change from Within representatives have come in and done that sort of training. So we've been really benefiting from the association.
Brilliant. And both of you mentioned the Circle of Friends, and so one of the things that I would love to do is to just hear a little bit more about the Circle of Friends and the role that it actually plays within the Change from Within program.
All right, well, I can start off. So as I said, this was one of the earliest components of the program. It actually was referred to initially in some instances as the Friendship Circle. It evolved into the Circle of Friends. It started off primarily principals meeting, sharing best practices and challenges, and seeking support from one another, as Mr. Bromfield indicated. And then over the years, it has actually evolved. So it's not only principals now, but it's principals, it's vice principals, in some cases, guidance counselors, senior teachers, persons who the principals themselves might identify as having leadership potential, and seeing the possibility of the circle for developing that leadership potential. So right now, since we started back in 2016, we meet on a monthly basis. This is during the school year. We normally meet here at the School of Education at the University of the West Indies. And I should say before I go on that, of course, since 2002, the Change from Within program has been implemented by the School of Education here at UWI. So we meet at the School of Education and we do different things for, it's about maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours each month. Principals, the vice principals, the guidance counselors, they can share challenges. They can seek solutions. You know, perhaps another school within the circle has faced this particular challenge. How did they address it? We share personal and professional milestones. We share school milestones. Just yesterday, for instance, one of the schools shared that they were celebrating their 50th anniversary. So it's a support mechanism. We sometimes play relaxing games, you know. It's just a way for the persons who sometimes perhaps others don't see the need, for them to have support. You know, they're the principal. They know what they're about. You know, they have it all in charge and in hand. So for them to gain some support and some friendship and collegiality. So.
Okay, brilliant. So you know I'm coming back to you. So tell us, how do you find the circle of friends?
It's something that I look forward to, because as Dr. Ferguson had mentioned, apart from the collegiality and the support that is derived from it, there's also that it allows us to see our issues through someone else's eyes, and it allows you to then take a step back and look at different ways of approaching something. You are able to do that because of what you hear other people say. You are able to do that because you hear different perspectives. And you are also able to be very comfortable with someone else and hear not only the kind of input that you would see up front, but the emotion that goes into what you do, how it is, the emotion that determines how you approach things, the kind of emotion that you should not have when you're approaching things, so that you learn those, you get a different perspective as to how to approach things. You also get to realize, which is very important for many of us in leadership, that some of the problems that we think are unique to us are not really unique, and that other persons are facing them and have found solutions. And sometimes even if the solutions are not ready, are not evident, not there at the moment, the fact that you are sharing the problem with someone and that you are sharing the effort to arrive at a solution makes the process of getting to the solution that much easier. So it's really good in that sense, and it is really good too because one of the things that it fosters, as the name of the program suggests, Change from Within, is that we can generate our own solutions. And we're in a sector where very often we are presented with solutions that don't necessarily fit our unique situations. And so this idea that has been sown in us, that it is within us, it is within our schools that we can find the solutions to solve our problems, is something else that is very gratifying.
Brilliant. And so if you were to talk about the Circle of Friends with another school that's not within the Change from Within program, what were some of the things that you might identify to them?
But it gives you a small group that you are able to be comfortable in and to share ideas without any fear of being perhaps saying being ridiculed is a stretch, but that your views and your ideas will be welcomed, and that you are so comfortable that you really get to the bottom of your issues, because you're not worried about, you're not distracted by what other people may think of you, or whether what you're saying may not be well received or so on, because you've gotten so comfortable that this is going to be well received. And you know that you will have the support. So if you are attempting to get to somewhere and you're not getting there, you'll be assisted without any kind of judgment. So that kind of environment frees you up to really think, and frees you up to really be as creative as you can. You also have an environment that helps you to evaluate yourself very well, because even Dr. Ferguson Murray mentioned some of the games we play. All the games have really very serious objectives, and you get to look at yourself through these activities and through several other activities, and you are able to evaluate yourself more clearly. And then once you do that, you are able to, I think, develop yourself in ways that you had not thought that you had needed the development. So I think that group, that environment, has done that for me. And so many things that I had perhaps thought of and through intuition felt that maybe this was right or wrong, being able to develop on that. So that is what I would say to someone, and it's a fantastic group to be a part of.
Thank you. Dr. Ferguson, you've stated that you've done some research as well on the circle. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us a little bit about your research and your findings, please?
Sure. Well, firstly, I should say that I felt compelled to do this research for two reasons. One was interacting with the circle and seeing, how the individuals were interacting, changing, and growing. And I want to know, all right, so how do they feel? This is me looking on, right? But how do they feel? Are they finding a benefit from this? Is it useful for them? So that was one reason. The second reason was that some research was actually carried out on the Change from Within program by some other colleagues within the School of Education. This was, a few years back, and as an outcome of that research, they actually identified the Circle of Friends as one of the most successful aspects of the program, and so they recommended as one of their recommendations coming out of it that further research should be done. So it was both a follow-up to that earlier research, but also to see what was actually happening. So I should acknowledge that the research was funded by a UWI grant from the Office of the Principal, a New Initiative grant, so I'm very grateful for that. And so we undertook some surveys, we undertook some one-on-one semi-structured interviews, and also we asked our participants, our principals, our circle members to keep reflective journals. So based on that research, there were several things that emerged which are quite important. One had to do with what Mr. Bromfield himself has spoken about, this idea of building capacity professionally and also personally. So yes, there's a professional aspect to it in terms of problem solving, engaging, reflecting, and so forth, dialogue, all of those aspects. There's also a personal component to it. These are friendships. When you're sharing things not only about your schools, but about yourself as individuals, you cannot help but form friendships and connections. So it, fulfills both of those aspects. And that was something that came out very strongly from the interviews. Another aspect that came out was this idea of reflection and vision and communication. I'm not sure if I've articulated that well, but basically what the circle members are saying from that research is that part of the change process, it's not only about changing the schools, changing those within the schools, it's about changing themselves. And so those reflective exercises that we engage in during the circle, the visioning exercises, the games that have that serious component, those serious objectives that Mr. Bromfield alluded to, all of that helps the circle members to look within. So how can I change what's happening around me if I'm not also changing myself and my own perceptions and how I see the students, how I see the teachers, how I see what's happening within the school? So that was also a critical finding, which was quite eye-opening for me. And it made me realize how important they found the reflection and the dialogue and how important it was to keep that up. Another critical finding had to do with the environments. So those 4 initial schools that the committee focused on were inner city schools. And the schools that we're working with now, a number of them are based in inner cities. A number of them have students who are coming from inner city communities. And these communities have, different characteristics, different challenges. Some of them have violence within them. And so what the principals, the vice principals, the circle members shared was that it was critical as part of that change from within process to create an environment within the schools that was different in some way from the environments that these students were coming from. And so they saw that as part of the change from within process. So the communicating, the reflection, the creating a safe space, a different space, and that personal and professional capacity building, those were some of the key findings coming out of that research on the circle.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. I do have to ask, so what next?
What next? Well, for us, from the perspective of the program team, we of course want to continue working with the schools we're already working with. We also hopefully want to add some new schools. So initially, when we restarted in 2016, we were working with 8 schools. This past school year, September 2017, we invited some new schools to join the program, and 3 of those responded. So we're now working with 11 schools. Funding, of course, is an issue. As I said, the program team, they're all volunteers. They're doing this because they see the importance of it. They see the moral purpose, but we need funding. And so if that funding comes into play, then we see ourselves moving into other schools within other parts of Jamaica. We've actually had some schools in Montego Bay and other places contact us, and at the moment we're not able to respond because of the limited funding. So continued, outreach, working with the schools, training, coaching, and of course the circle.
Yes. Okay, brilliant, thank you. Mr. Bromfield, anything else to add?
That I hope to see, and I pray that it will continue, because it certainly has been such a fantastic experience. As Dr. Ferguson Morris says, I would like anything that is so good. We hope to share it with more persons. We think too that if it continues, it gives all the stakeholders in the program a greater opportunity to see the development that has occurred in the schools as a result of the interventions that they have allowed. And so we hope that it can get the kind of recognition that it deserves, and the financial assistance, so that it can be expanded and continued.
Thank you. If individuals wanted to get more information about the Circle of Friends or the Change from Within program, who would they be able to contact? Who could they contact?
All right, so they can contact myself through the School of Education. There's actually a web page on the School of Education UWI site, or just call the School of Education department and ask for me. I'm always happy to respond to queries or anything that a school or an interested person might want to know. I just also want to add something to what Mr. Bromfield was saying about the development of what's happening in the schools. One of the other things that we hope to work on in the coming school year is actually documenting some of the changes that have taken place. There were some earlier booklets that documented the story of the 4 schools and so forth. And so with our current cohort of schools, we're hoping to do that, to document whether in a written format or a video oral format, what is actually taking place. What are these transformations that you are experiencing within your schools? How is this transformation coming about?
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching this week's edition of The Research Room. I hope that you enjoyed it and enjoyed listening to all that Dr. Ferguson and Mr. Bromfield had to say in regards to the Change From Within programme. I'm your host, Keisha Ann Down.
Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this program. Remember, you can watch this and all our programs on our website, www.uitv.org, available anytime, anywhere, and on any device. Also, join the conversation on social media by visiting our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages.